The 2026 NFL free agency has been insane. We might as well start with the biggest story of the offseason. Nothing's been messier than the Ravens' whole transaction with Maxx Crosby than getting Trey Hendrickson. And I've been recording this for 3 different days because something new keeps happening, and we're just going to go with it at this point. Crosby was a 4th round pick out of Eastern Michigan in 2019, a guy most casual fans couldn't pick out of lineup of 1. Since then, he has put together one of the most impressive careers of this era by racking up nearly 70 sacks and making 5 Pro Bowls. His motor's insane because he played over 94% of the snaps for 4 straight years. While Crosby was always on the field producing at an elite level, the Raiders just kept losing games around him. The environment in Los Angeles was a total mess with 5 losing seasons and 5 different head coaches during his tenure. Crosby was the only thing that stayed consistent while the rest of the organization cycled through 4 GMs. After the Raiders finished 3-14 in 2025 and benched him for the final 2 weeks, it was clear that he was finally done with the situation. Los Angeles did the smart thing here by cashing in on his value while it was at an all-time high. Baltimore sent over their first-round picks for 2026 and 2027 to land a 28-year-old pass rusher who still has plenty of elite football left in the tank. Then it all collapsed. Crosby had undergone surgery in January to repair a torn meniscus. During his physical, the Ravens discovered medical concerns significant enough to back out entirely. GM Eric DeCosta called it gutting. Crosby's agent insisted he was ahead of schedule in his recovery. It turned out to be one of the most dramatic trades in recent NFL history, completely wiped out before it even became official. And now Crosby remains a Raider, and so the Ravens pivoted to a division rival. Trey Hendrickson was drafted by the Saints in the 3rd round back in 2017. He developed quietly in New Orleans before signing with Cincinnati in 2021, where he immediately became one of the most feared pass rushers in the entire league. Back-to-back 17.5 seasons in 2023 and 2024. 4 Pro Bowl selections and an All-Pro nod. The man was producing at an elite level. But the relationship with the Bengals became a mess. He requested a trade, demanded a new contract, and the two sides spent over a year going back and forth before settling on a 1-year Band-Aid deal. Then in 2025, a core muscle injury cut his season short to just 7 games and required surgery in December. At 31 years old, he had free agency for the first time since 2021 with something to prove. Baltimore had already swung on Crosby and missed, and they needed the edge presence badly. So they pivoted fast and landed Hendrickson on a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million fully guaranteed. And now he's the pass rusher of the future for the Baltimore Ravens. And a huge thank you to our sponsor Kalshi for sponsoring today's video. Since we're talking about Maxx Crosby, I decided to look up what the market would be for him now that he's on a new team to win Defensive Player of the Year. Kalshi is the largest legal prediction market in the US with over 1 million users. Right now, you can trade on whether you think Maxx Crosby wins Defensive Player of the Year. The contract sits at 14 cents, which means the market thinks that there's a 14% chance that it actually happens. If you trade 14 cents and you're right, you get $1 per contract. What's cool about Kalshi is that it's peer-to-peer trading. No sportsbook tilting odds against you or limiting your trades when you start winning. Plus, it's available in all 50 states, and Kalshi's giving away $20 to anybody who uses my link down below and also trades with $20. Thanks again to Kalshi for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. We now have to go over the biggest trade that actually went through in the offseason with Trent McDuffie. The Chiefs originally took Duffy with the 21st overall pick back in 2022, and he quickly turned into one of the most physical and intelligent corners in the game. He was a kind of foundational piece you usually never let walk away, but everything changed when Kansas City missed the playoffs in 2025 for the first time in over a decade. That failure forced a reset, and the Rams are waiting with a massive offer. Los Angeles sent over 4 picks to Kansas City, including their first rounder at 29, just to get him in the building. Once the trade was finalized, McDuffie signed a record-breaking 4-year deal worth $124 million. With $100 million of that guaranteed, he's now the highest-paid cornerback in the history of the NFL. The Rams didn't just pay a premium in draft capital, they also reset the market for the position. The real question is whether any defensive back is actually worth that much of the salary cap. The Rams are coming off a 12-win season where they fell just short in the NFC Championship game, so they know they're right on the doorstep of another title. Adding a lockdown 24-year-old cornerback who hasn't even hit his prime yet makes him even more deadly. These 2 trades really set the tone for the rest of the offseason because they were aggressive win-now moves that happened before the tampering window even started. Every other GM woke up that Saturday morning and realized the bar had been raised. The Ravens and the Rams refused to wait around for the market to develop, and that urgency defined every move that followed. Back in 2019, Arizona made Murray the #1 overall pick in the draft. He was electric from day one, a dual threat nightmare that nobody could game plan for. He put up Pro Bowl numbers, gave the franchise its first playoff appearance in years, and looked like the guy they'd build around for the next decade. but it never quite came together the way anybody hoped. Injuries defined his final years in Arizona. A torn ACL wiped out most of 2022. Then in 2025, a foot injury in week 5 ended his season before it really even started. And honestly, even before the injury, the offense was struggling. The Cardinals were losing close games and the production just really wasn't there. Arizona placed him on IR and he never came back. He had 7 seasons with 87 games and over 20,000 passing yards, but it ended with a foot injury and a quiet release on March 11, 2026. Kyler posted on Instagram about him being released, but the story wasn't over yet. It was actually a very quick turnaround for him. The Minnesota Vikings swooped in immediately, signing Murray to a 1-year deal. And now he'll have Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison around him, arguably the best supporting cast of his career. So we'll see how he does in the upcoming season. Someone back where it all started is Geno Smith. In 2013, the Jets drafted Smith in the 2nd round out of West Virginia. He started 29 games over 2 seasons, threw 34 interceptions, and was already fighting for his job heading into 2015. Then, in one of the most bizarre moments in NFL history, a backup linebacker punched him in the jaw over a $600 dispute, fracturing his jaw and ending his season before it even began. That was basically the end of Geno Smith as a Jet. He spent years bouncing around the league as a backup with the Giants, Chargers, and the Seahawks before Pete Carroll handed him the keys in Seattle in 2022. What happened next was genuinely one of the best redemption arcs the league had ever seen. He led the NFL with 69% completion percentage through 30 touchdowns, made the Pro Bowl, and won Comeback Player of the Year. He made the Pro Bowl again in 2023, then things started to unravel. 2 straight seasons of turnover problems, 32 interceptions over that stretch, and after a disaster in 2025, the Raiders eventually moved on. Instead of waiting for his release, the Jets traded a 6th-round pick to get him back. Geno renegotiated his deal and will make $19.5 million this season. After 9 years, he's back in the same city with the same jersey, just a complete full circle moment. While Baltimore and Los Angeles were busy making roster moves, 2 other franchises were solving their QB situations in a very different way. First, we have Tua Tagovailoa going to the Falcons. The Dolphins actually cut Tua Tagovailoa this offseason, which is a sentence that would have felt impossible to write just a couple of years ago. Back then, he was putting up Pro Bowl numbers and looked like a legitimate franchise QB who could lead the team for a decade. However, the concussion history never went away and the inconsistency stayed a factor. So Miami finally decided they'd seen enough. They moved on from him despite the fact they're still on the hook for $54 million in guaranteed money, leaving the Dolphins with a $99 million dead cap hit, the largest in NFL history. Atlanta decided to pick him up on a 1-year deal worth $1.2 million, which is basically the league minimum. From a financial risk standpoint, the move costs them almost zero if it doesn't work out. The Falcons already have Michael Penix recovering from a torn ACL, so they needed a legitimate backup who could step in and run a real offense if Penix isn't ready to go or gets hurt again. Tua fits that role in theory because he has 76 starts on his resume and has played at a Pro Bowl level. He knows exactly what it takes to run a modern NFL offense at a high level when he is healthy and right. There's another detail that makes this work operationally because Tua and Penix are both lefty QBs. Atlanta doesn't have to flip the playbook or change the snap counts, and they won't have to adjust anything on the daily operations for the offensive line. It makes things seamless from a practice standpoint. Kevin Stefanski can plug Tua in as a true backup without losing any of the timing his offense runs on, which is a huge advantage for coaching staff. Now, the real question nobody wants to say out loud is what happens if Tua actually plays well? Things can get really interesting because Stefanski is a guy who will play whoever gives him the best chance to win, unless you're Shedeur Sanders. If Tua looks sharp in the first few weeks while Penix is still working his way back, that situation can get complicated pretty fast. For now, it's a low-risk insurance move with high upside, but there is a version where this becomes the most interesting QB room in the NFC South by October. And speaking of the Dolphins, Malik Willis replaced Tua in Miami. This move is completely different because Miami isn't bringing in a backup to sit on the bench, they're betting on Malik Willis as their actual starter. Willis was originally a 3rd-round pick by the Tennessee Titans in 2022, but Tennessee never really gave him a fair shot to prove himself. He barely played in 2 seasons there before eventually landing in Green Bay as a backup for Jordan Love. What he did with those limited opportunities was genuinely impressive to watch. In 11 games across 2 seasons with the Packers, he posted a 134.6 passer rating and threw for 972 yards with 6 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He also added 261 rushing yards to the stat sheet, and watching him play showed a player who was finally processing the game at a high level. Now he's 26 years old, which is the prime age for a QB getting his first real shot at a starting job. The connection to Miami's new head coach Jeff Hafley is a key factor here. Hafley was a defensive coordinator in Green Bay, so he watched Willis every single day in practice and saw how he prepared. He didn't just see the highlights, he saw the whole picture of who Willis is as a leader. That kind of familiarity is exactly why this move makes sense for the Dolphins. The contract ended up being 3 years for $67.5 million with $45 million of that guaranteed. Many people expected the price to land closer to $30 million per year even with his limited starts, but he came in well under that mark. For a young QB with real upside and a clean arm, Miami got a reasonable deal on a swing worth taking. Now let's talk about the receiver market, because this offseason has had some pretty significant movement at that position. We saw a homegrown star get locked up, a legend find a new home, and a trade that cleared up cap space while filling a roster hole at the same time. Alec Pierce stayed with the Colts, and it costed him his teammate. Alec Pierce was easily the most coveted receiver set to hit the open market this offseason, but the Colts made sure that never actually got there. 5 minutes after free agency opened, they locked him up on a 4-year extension worth $114 million. That averages out to $28.5 million per year with $84 million in guarantees. The reason he commanded that kind of money is pretty simple when you look at the production. Pierce led the entire NFL with 21.3 yards per reception last season, proving he is a true deep threat who can change a game in one play. He's a big, fast receiver who can turn a routine completion into a 40-yard gain whenever he touches the ball. He put up 47 catches for over 1,000 yards in 2025, which was the first 1,000-yard season of his career. The connection between Pierce and Jones was very real last season as they found a rhythm together down the stretch. The honest risk here is that the team only had one great season worth of evidence to look at. Pierce hasn't done it twice yet, but the Colts are already paying him like a perennial all-pro. That's a bet that requires him to make another step forward rather than sliding back toward his earlier career numbers. But elite downfield receivers don't grow on trees, and when you find one that fits your system, you kinda have to pay him. Mike Evans just seemed like he wanted to leave Tampa and go to the 49ers. This move is all about legacy meeting a massive opportunity for a championship. Mike Evans spent his entire career in Tampa, where he put up 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons over a 12-year span. That's one of the most consistent runs a receiver has ever put together in the history of the league, and it all happened in one uniform. Seeing him sign with another team is genuinely strange for anyone who follows the sport. However, he turns 33 in August and has battled some tough injuries over the last 2 seasons, including a broken clavicle in 2025. Tampa wasn't interested in bringing him back on a massive deal at this stage of his career, and San Francisco was willing to step up and give him a 3-year, $60.4 million deal to be their clear number 2 target. After the Brandon Ayuk situation left a real void at the top of their receiver room, they needed a veteran who could produce immediately. He wins jump balls and dominates in the red zone, which gives Brock Purdy a weapon he has never really had in this offense. He's a true big body target who can go up and get the ball when a play breaks down and the QB has to scramble. The 49ers have always been able to manufacture offense through creative schemes, but having a physical mismatch on the outside changes what defenses have to account for. The durability is a real concern at his age, but when Evans is healthy, in-game, he's still a problem for cornerbacks. And to round out the receivers, we have Michael Pittman Jr. traded to the Steelers. This trade is pretty straightforward when you look at the roster math in Indianapolis. The rise of Alec Pierce made Michael Pittman Jr. expendable for the Colts. He was the top receiver on the depth chart going into 2025, but Pierce emerged and passed him as the primary target. Once that happened, Pittman's $29 million cap charge became a major problem for the front office. Indy traded him to Pittsburgh for a late-round pick swap and cleared $24 million off their books. The Steelers needed this move badly because their receiver room was looking thin. Beyond DK Metcalf, no other Pittsburgh receiver had more than 31 catches all of last season. That really isn't a supporting cast, it's a liability that holds the entire offense back. Pittman gives them a legit second option the moment he walked into the building. He's a physical contested catch receiver who knows how to win at the line of scrimmage against press coverage. Pittsburgh offense got meaningfully better the day that this trade was made, and it gives whoever their QB is going to be a much needed reliable second target. Running backs usually don't move the needle in free agency like they used to because the position has been devalued for years. Kenneth Walker's coming off of a Super Bowl MVP performance where he put up 1,309 scrimmage yards in the regular season and another 417 yards in the playoffs. When Seattle needed someone to carry the load in January, he was the guy who stepped up and he earned every bit of the contract that followed. But here's the thing you have to realize. Seattle let him walk for a very specific reason. Walker and Zach Charbonnet split snaps all season long, and the Seahawks never actually committed to Walker as a true bell cow back. Before the postseason run even started, the front office already decided his price tag was going to be too high for their liking. Once he dominated the Super Bowl, his value jumped through the roof, leading to a 3-year deal worth $45 million with $29 million guaranteed. That's one of the highest average annual salaries ever paid to a free agent running back, and Seattle simply looked at that number and passed. Kansas City was waiting in the wings for this exact moment, and when you think about what the Chiefs have been missing in the backfield, this makes a lot more sense when you look at their offense. The last time they had a true featured back that defenders genuinely had to game plan around was Jamal Charles all the way back in 2012. Since then, it's been a revolving door of committee approaches and situational guys, while Patrick Mahomes made everyone look better than they actually were. Walker changes that dynamic completely because teams finally have to respect the run, meaning they can't just pin their ears back and hunt Mahomes on every single down. That opens up the entire playbook, and giving Mahomes more room to operate is a terrifying thought for every defensive coordinator in the AFC. We also have Travis Etienne Jr. to the Saints. Travis Etienne put together 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons during his 4 years in Jacksonville. He's explosive in open space, excellent as a receiver outside the backfield, and versatile enough to stay on the field for every third down. Even with that production, the Jags let him walk and New Orleans was ready to pounce. The Saints signed him to a 4-year, $52 million deal, and if you watched him play last season, you know exactly why they made the move. New Orleans ranked 31st in yards per carry as a team, which is essentially a non-existent run game, second and last. They were trying to build a real passing offense under Kellen Moore, but without any threat on the ground, defenses could just load up and take away their primary targets. ETN fixes that problem immediately. Kellen Moore's offense is at its best when it's balanced, much like the system he ran in Philadelphia with the Eagles. He wants to be able to run the ball effectively so he can hurt you through the air on this very same drive. ETN is the kind of back who fits that vision perfectly because he can take a draw play to the second level or catch a wheel route out of the backfield. He gives this offense another dimension it simply didn't have last year. There's also a major footnote to consider here regarding the roster. Alvin Kamara's future in New Orleans is suddenly looking very murky. And since Kellen Moore's system doesn't really require two high-end price backs, this move tells you a lot about where they're headed. The defense got its fair share of the big money this offseason as well, starting with Jalen Phillips to the Panthers. Miami originally drafted Jalen Phillips, but he battled injuries for years there, including Achilles issues and an ACL injury that slowed down his development and made everyone nervous about his long-term durability. That changed when the Dolphins traded him to Philadelphia midway through the 2025 season, where he looked completely healthy across 8 games with the Eagles. He put up multiple sacks, 17 pressures, and 4 tackles for loss during that stretch, showing the league that his motor was still there. Suddenly, the market for his services looked a lot different than it had just 6 months earlier. Carolina stepped up and signed him to a 4-year, $120 million deal, which averages out to $30 million per year. That's elite edge rusher money, the same as Maxx Crosby. And usually that pay is about the market rate for a player you're 100% certain about. The thing is, the Panthers aren't actually certain about him, they're betting on him. Paying him $30 million a year assumes he stays on the field, produces consistently as a pass rusher, and finally takes a next step as an every down player. Those are 3 separate gambles stacked on top of each other. And here's the reason why it's still defensible. Carolina only had 30 sacks as a team last season despite winning the NFC South. It's a massive problem that needed to be addressed, and they needed an impact player on the edge immediately. Now they get to pair Phillips with Nick Scorton, who was their 2nd round pick in 2025. If both of those guys can stay healthy, that becomes a legitimate edge duo for years to come. The Panthers took a calculated risk on a player with massive talent who has never quite put it together for a full season, so the success of this deal comes down entirely to his availability. I have absolutely no idea why the Commanders wanted Odafe Oweh for so much money. Odafe Oweh took a long path to Washington that went through Baltimore and then Los Angeles. The Ravens drafted him and used him for a while before moving him at the trade deadline last year, which led him to the Chargers. Los Angeles used him differently by putting him in on about 35% of the snaps, mostly in obvious passing situations. In that specialized role, he managed to stack 10 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons, including the playoffs. While the counting stats look good, the context behind them is what you really need to understand. Washington signed him to a 4-year, $100 million contract with $68 million guaranteed. That comes out to $25 million per year, which is top tier money for a guy who has never really been trusted as an every down starter. The Commanders needed pass rush help badly, and since they had the cap space to make a move, they decided to go all in. The concern here is pretty obvious. Baltimore didn't trust him enough to keep him, and Los Angeles only used him in a limited role. Now Washington is paying him like he's the cornerstone they can build their entire defensive front around. Both of these contracts carry a massive amount of risk for the teams involved. The Panthers and Commanders both are showing glaring needs on their roster and decided to take their shot while they had the money to spend. And that's just how the business works sometimes. We have the final 2 moves to get to, first being John Harbaugh stealing Isaiah Likely to the Giants. Isaiah Likely spent 4 years in Baltimore playing the role of an overqualified backup to Mark Andrews. Because Andrews was one of the more premier tight ends in the league, the Ravens never really needed a second option at the position, which left Likely waiting in the wings for a chance that rarely came. Even with his limited snaps, the talent was obvious every time he touched the ball. He's athletic and fast with soft hands, and he managed to average 11.6 yards per catch throughout his time in Baltimore. He simply never had the volume or the opportunity to prove he could carry an offense over a full 17-game season. Now he turns 26 this April and finds himself in a completely different world in New York. The Giants handed him a 3-year deal with $40 million, and their new head coach John Harbaugh is the exact person who knows how to use him. Since Harbaugh coached Likely in Baltimore and watched him develop every single day in practice, he isn't guessing about the potential here. The most interesting part about this is now he pairs the 2nd-year quarterback Jackson Dart. Young quarterbacks always use tight ends as a security blanket while they're still trying to figure out the speed of the pro game, and Likely is the perfect safety valve to bail Dart out when a play breaks down. Another Raven left in historic fashion with Tyler Linderbaum going to the Raiders. This move is less about highlights and more about building a solid foundation for the future. Tyler Linderbaum has been the heartbeat of the Ravens offensive line since 2022. During his 4 years in Baltimore, he started 66 games and earned 3 straight Pro Bowl nods, and by 2025, Pro Football Focus officially ranked him as the 5th best center in the entire league. He's arguably the best interior lineman the game has today at just 25 years old. To get him to Las Vegas, the Raiders had to make him the highest paid center in NFL history with a 3-year, $81 million contract that included $60 million guaranteed. You're going to hear plenty of people criticize the price tag because traditional logic says you don't need to break the bank at center to win. Seahawks just proved you can win a Super Bowl while spending almost nothing at the position, and stars like Creed Humphrey are currently playing at an elite level for significantly less than what Linderbaum just signed for. But here's the thing, the Raiders aren't worried about being efficient right now because they're trying to build a functional organization from the ground up. With Fernando Mendoza expected to be the first overall pick in April, Los Angeles is doing everything possible to make sure their new franchise quarterback has a clean pocket to work from. Even if the total dollar amount feels like a reach, investing in a 25-year-old anchor to grow alongside Mendoza is a smart, long-term play for a franchise that has struggled with stability. So there you have it. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you're new.